Welcome back. So right now we are going to be decorating the football jersey cookie in this video, and we got to have our supplies ready. The supplies that we're going to need for decorating this, I have some spatulas for mixing up the icing. I have my little decorating tools. You can use something like this, or you can use, these are called scribes, but you can also use a toothpick, or honestly, you can sometimes just use the tip of your icing bag, and I'll show you that when we're decorating. Speaking of icing bags, I have 3 icing bags ready to go right here. I have bag clips to close off the tops of them. Depending on how much icing you put on, you might be able to tie off the top if there's not a lot of icing in there. But I like using these little bag toppers. They're just really simple and they keep it sealed nice. You're going to need some type of cup for putting your bag in, for filling it up. It makes it much easier, so you just stick it in there, fold the top over, and then you're able to put your icing into the bag really easily using a cup. So we've got our cup ready to go. I also have my icing mixed up. I went ahead and mixed up the colors. So I'm going to be making a purple jersey, and this is because my husband is a big Baltimore Ravens fan. So we're going to be making a purple Baltimore Ravens jersey. You can obviously make this any color jersey you want. So whatever your team happens to be that you're celebrating, you just mix up the color that you need for that jersey. For whatever color you want for your jersey, you're going to need 2 different consistencies. So I went ahead and separated out. I have a thicker consistency in this bowl, and then I have a thinner consistency in this bowl, and we'll talk about the consistencies in just a minute. And I also have white. You're just going to need 1 consistency of white. And I have some half and half that we are going to use for thinning down the icing if we need to make it a thinner consistency. And I have a little measuring spoon. This is 1/8 of a teaspoon because you're just going to want to add a little bit of liquid, very small amount at a time when you're mixing up your consistencies. Okay, so let's get started. So as far as the consistency goes, the largest amount of purple that we're going to need is going to be the flood consistency. And what I like to do for a flood consistency is I like to do what's called a 15-second flood. And that means that in approximately 15 seconds, your icing, after you mix it up like this, stir it, make it kind of messy, set your spatula down and count to 15. And after 15 seconds, it should completely level out to be flat and smooth. So let's test this one and see where we are with it. And when you're mixing, I like to use these spatulas because it's important to get all of the bottom and sides of the bowl mixed in, just in case some of it has more liquid than other parts. All right, so let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Now you can see, if you take a look at this, that it has almost completely smoothed out at the top after about 15 seconds. And if I take the bowl and I jiggle it like this and tap it a little bit, then it's pretty much completely smooth. This is a little bit thicker than a 15-second consistency. I would say it's more like a 20-second consistency. I'm actually okay with this because I like the fact that it does smooth out and flatten out completely, but I also don't have to worry about it being too runny and running off the sides of the cookie. This is a great consistency to use for both outlining and filling in the cookie because of the fact that it is thicker. You can first outline the cookie with this consistency, and then you can flood the inside of it all with the same consistency. This saves you time and effort because this way you do not have to mix up an outline consistency and a flood consistency and do 2 different bags for decorating 1 cookie. So because of that, I'm going to keep this one as it is, since I do see that it does completely smooth itself out after time. That's all I'm looking for. So we're going to be okay with this. So what I'm gonna go ahead, now that I have the right consistency, I will go ahead and fill my icing bag with the flood consistency. In the meantime, I do have my other icings covered up with plastic wrap. This is a crusting buttercream icing that we're using, which means that with time and exposure to the air, it will crust over. So while you're not working on your icing, go ahead and cover it up with some plastic wrap or have it in some type of container with a lid on it, just so that it doesn't start crusting up. All right, now let's fill up our icing bag. Because we're going to be flooding the jerseys with this, I have the largest quantity of this one, but it's still probably more than I'll really need. Okay, then I just twist the bag top, make sure that it's all nicely sealed in there, twist the whole top up, I just fold it down over and then stick my bag clip on and lock it closed, and that's it. This icing is ready to go, and when we're ready to start decorating, then we will use some scissors to trim the tip off. Okay, next, on this cookie, we're going to be adding some detail. After the initial flood coat is crusted over a little bit, we're going to add some details onto the jersey to give it the look of a collar and sleeves and a little bit of lines to show the seams on the shirt. So for that consistency, we do want it to be thicker than the flood. So let's stir this up and see. This is a very thick consistency. If you look, you can see it just sticks to the spatula completely. It blobs off. It's not smooth and runny like our flood consistency was. It's very thick. I think I might actually add a little bit of half and half to this, just to make it a little bit easier for piping onto the cookie, because this is very thick right now, and it might actually be hard to pipe it out in a very thin little line at this consistency. So let's add a tiny bit of half and half, just so like I said, this is a 1/8 teaspoon, and I didn't even fill it half up. I just have a little drop in there. I don't want to add a lot because I don't want this to accidentally get too runny where I don't have control over it for adding my detail lines. I just want to make it a little bit smoother for piping. This is actually much better. So at this point, just that tiny little bit of liquid, you can kind of see how it flows off of the spatula a little bit more than it did before. It's smoother, and when you pull up on it, it kind of gets a little like loose peak that quickly falls over. And I like that. That's a good consistency for my detail lines. So I'm going to go ahead and fill up my second icing bag with this smaller quantity. You do not need a lot of this detail. A little bit is all you need. So this is a small quantity, and it's still going to end up being a lot more than what I need. I do like to push the icing down a little bit into the tip of the bag so that I don't end up with too much extra space in there. All right, now we will twist it, and like I mentioned earlier, because this is such a small quantity, I could just tie a knot in the bag, which I will do for this one just to show you. You can just knot it off like that, and then I'll just trim off the top, and there we have our nice little detail consistency of the purple. The last icing that we need to mix up is going to be our white detail. Now for this one, This one I'm going to be using for putting on whatever you want to put on your jersey. If you want to put a number on there, if you want to put a name on, I'm going to be using white, and I'm going to be putting a number on top of my purple jersey. I'm going to do a number 8. That's my husband's favorite number, and I think he likes a player on the Ravens that has a number 8. I am not really a football person, so I don't actually know anything about this, but I like decorating cookies, so that's what we're doing. We're gonna do a number 8, and this is very thick, and so I'm gonna try and get it to more of that same consistency that we just did for our purple detail consistency. You can see how thick this is right now. It's just not really running smooth at all. It's just kind of breaking off. Let's add a very, very tiny amount of our half and half. All right, now look at this. Just that tiny amount of half and half, and I can feel a difference in this icing. It still looks pretty thick, but you can tell how it globs off a little bit smoother than before. When you're working with different icing consistencies, it just takes a lot of time and practice to get the feel for what you're looking for. And the good thing is that if you do mix up icing and it happens to be a consistency that's not working for what you need, you just remix it. You can empty out your bag, squeeze it into a bowl, and remix it. If you need it to be thicker, just add a little bit of powdered sugar. If you need it to be thinner, add a little bit of half and half. Okay, so we're ready to start decorating. The first thing that we need to do is trim the tips off of our bags. I'm going to start with our flood bag, since that's the one I'm going to use to flood this cookie, and I'm going to trim off the tip. Now, so when you're trimming the tip off, you're going to want to start very small. Make the smallest hole possible, because obviously you can go bigger, but you can't go back smaller again. And what I like to do is flatten out the tip. Okay, so you're going to find the seam on your bag and use that to make a nice flat tip on your bag. And then you're just going to take your scissors and you're going to just try and cut as straight as possible across so that you're making a perfectly straight line. Try not to cut it at an angle at all. And like I said, you're just going to cut the very, very tip off, small little hole. Okay, so I trimmed that off. Now we can test it on a paper towel, see how it's looking. Okay, this is kind of coming out in probably smaller than what I need, and you can see how it's kind of bunching up when it comes out. That's because this hole is so tiny. So that is fine. Like I said, better to start too small than too big. So now just take your paper towel, pinch off the very end so that you have a nice clean tip again. And we're just going to cut a little bit bigger this time. Now that was not perfectly across. I'm going to make it a little bit flatter. Okay. All right. Now we're just going to take our icing and outline our cookie. I like to just start at one of the corners and just go around the outline. When you are using your icing, you actually do not want the tip of your bag to be touching the cookie. It's actually easier if you lift the bag up. So first you touch it down to get the icing stuck on the cookie, and then you lift the bag up about ½ inch from the cookie and just let the icing fall down onto the cookie, and you're going to get an easier, smooth, straight line or curve or whatever shape you're trying to go on if you lift the tip up off of the cookie. And then when you get to an angle, like here on the shirt, then you touch it back down onto that point, lift it back up, touch it back down, lift up, touch down, and you do that on all of the different points. Okay. So we're gonna, and every time you get started, make sure you don't have any extra icing on the tip of your bag. So you can just come over to your paper towel and just pinch off the end, clean it off, and make sure that it's ready to go. All right, here we go. So I touched down there, and now I'm just going to, and I did get a little spot there where it broke up, and that's okay. You can just go back and fix it. Okay. All right, now again, we're going to touch down here, lift up, let it fall down on the cookie. And you see how my bag tip is lifted up above the cookie here. It is not down touching the cookie. You have more control over where your icing lands that way. And coming back around, touch down right there, and now we're back at the beginning. Now at this point, we're going to flood the cookie. So we're just going to use the same bag. You're just going to be squeezing it a little bit harder to get the icing to come out faster and thicker. I like to do this because of the fact that we did not line our cookie with a thicker consistency. I like to do this a little bit like 1/4 of an inch in from the outline. That gives my icing room to expand without overflowing off the cookie. So I'm not going to flood right up next to my outline. I'm going to flood right here inside the cookie, and then I can come back with my scribe or just the tip of my icing bag and smooth it out to make sure it goes all the way to the edges. But you see how much icing comes out when you're squeezing the bag. Now go back, you have a little spot like this where it's, less. All right. So now you can see it's already starting to flatten itself out since we did that consistency where we know after about 15 to 20 seconds, it's going to smooth itself out completely. Now at this point, I could use my scribe or I can use the tip of my icing bag. I'm just going to use the tip of my icing bag. That way, if I feel like there's some spots where I need to squeeze a little bit more icing out, I can do that to fill in a gap. But you just use this to gently swirl the icing over until it touches the edge, because it will not do that on its own. If I just left it like it was, it would not ever go and touch the edge. But I think I squeezed out enough icing that it was thick enough that I have plenty of icing to work with here to just kind of massage it over to the edge of the cookie and make sure that it's all touching my outline, and that way it'll be a nice smooth flood on our cookie once it dries. And if you have a little dimple, a spot where it looks like there's less icing, then just go and squeeze a little bit of icing there to make it kind of smooth out a little bit. And now I'll show you, if you want to use a scribe, you can do the same thing with a scribe, swirling the icing until it nicely matches up. Now, if you ended up getting a part of your cookie where you felt like your initial outline didn't go all the way to the edge of the cookie or something like that, you can also do that at this point. You can use your scribe to kind of move the icing gently around and get it a little bit more closer to a corner or an edge or whatever you might want it to do. If you have any air bubbles in your cookie that you don't like and you want to pop, you can just go in there and pop them. Okay, if your cookie is not, if the icing is not flattening itself out, just gently shake. You can tap the bottom a little bit. And there you can see we have a pretty nice smooth flood on our cookie. Now this is a crusting buttercream recipe, which means that with time it will develop a crust over it. It's not going to harden completely like royal icing, but it will get a nice crust on it that means you can package it. So I let my cookie sit out overnight to let the buttercream icing frost over. So here we have it. If you gently touch it, you can feel that it feels like it is definitely crusted over. If you pushed on the buttercream at this point, it would still be soft. You would still be able to make a dent in it, so don't do that. It's still fragile. You have to be careful with it. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to use our detail purple to add a little bit of detail on the jersey, like around the neck and the sleeves, to make it look a little bit more realistic. So we're going to cut a very small hole again. We do not want this to be a big one, so let's flatten out the tip. Nice straight across. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to add on here, I'm just gonna clear my tip off, make sure it's ready. Let's test this on our napkin first, make sure we like it. This looks good to me. It can make a nice line. So the first thing I want to do, I'm gonna add a little bit of a collar here. So I'm gonna do a V-neck coming down. Touch up at the top. I'm going to do a second V just right next to it, just to give it a little bit of a depth. And then I'm going to do a curved collar. And a second line of a curved collar with that. Okay. All right, now I'm going to take a line here. I'm going to go across the jersey to about where the sleeve is. A little bit of a spot there where I gotta touch that up. Okay, now I'm going to just bring this straight down and outline the outside of the shirt right here. So let's turn this. So again, we're touching down, I'm lifting up again, just like I did when I outlined the cookie. I'm not letting it be right down, I'm kind of letting it fall. Okay, let's come around here to the bottom. Again, touch down and then lift up. Pull your icing and then touch down here. Let's do the same thing again. Now, if you find that it's not working, clear your tip off. I got a little bit of a messy spot right there. You can take your scribe and just kind of wipe it off. All right, lift up and let it fall down. All right, it did break a couple times, so I'm just going to come back in here and fill in the gaps where the icing broke. And that can happen because of air bubbles in your icing. It just happens. It's also because we're dealing with a thicker consistency. All right, now we're going to do a little bit of a line up here for our jersey sleeve. Just kind of a little curved line. I'm going to do the edge, do a little bit of a accent on the end of the sleeve here. I'm going to come around and finish outlining the rest of the jersey because I like how it looks to have a little bit of an outline coming around it. Okay, and then if you want, you can also come in and add some more details to make it look like some wrinkles are in the jersey. Okay, so we can do a little bit of a wrinkle here inside the sleeve. Over here. All right, do a little bit of an accent up here on the top. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with our details on our jersey. So at this point now we're just going to add the number. So again, I'm going to trim off the tip of my white. I made it a little bit thicker than I did on the pink detail. Let's see how that turned out. That's good. So for my 8, I'm going to try to make it look kind of like that angular font like they do on jerseys. So let's see. Okay, now remember I said I made my white just a little bit more liquidy so that I could come in and fill in my number. So at this point, I'm going to kind of flood the inside of my number 8 by squeezing a little bit harder, just like we did when we flooded the cookie. Then you can use the tip of your icing bag to kind of fill in this 8 like that, making sure that you touch all of the little edges, or you can come in with your scribe tool and just gently swirl the icing until you get it to fill in all the different little holes and touch the outlines of your number. And you can also use it to smooth out your number if you feel like some of the outline needs to be a little bit smoothed out. Okay, there we go. All right, so our jersey cookie is done. I'm pretty happy with the way it turned out. And like I said, this is completely customizable. Use whatever colors you want for whatever team you want. Put a different number, put a different name of a player, whatever you want to put on there. And that's it for our jersey cookie. I'll see you in the next video.